President Trump's political and personal battles with the late Senator John McCain were no secret both ways. But the drama that played out yesterday surrounding the changing position of the American flag was both embarrassing for the White House and a dishonor to the memory of McCain. That aside, technically, according to code, the president was right. But being right and doing what's right are different.
Flags dropped to half-staff Saturday as the nation learned of the passing of Senator John McCain. Then on Monday, the flag at the White House returned to full staff. People freaked at this, rendering it an act of indecency and disrespect. Whatever the case, technically, the president followed the U.S. flag code to a T. 4 U.S. Code 7M says that following the death of a president, the flag should fly at half-staff 30 days. A vice president, chief justice, or speaker of the House, 10 days. A former vice president or governor, the flag should fly at half-staff until interment. And for a member of Congress, as in Senator McCain's case, code says to fly the flag half-staff on the day of death and the day after. This would be Saturday and Sunday. That is what the president did. But the uproar is not without merit, though. Recent tradition defies the code, the bare minimum, and has honored late Congress members with a flag at half-staff until their funeral. This was the case for Senators Ted Kennedy and Robert Byrd. While reporters and critics demanded answers from the president.
Any thoughts on John McCain, sir?
Governors waited for direction on what to do. After all, it's the president's call. 5 minutes before the president caved to mounting pressure, Governor Dayton issued his own proclamation honoring Senator McCain and ordering flags in Minnesota to fly at half-staff until the funeral. Technically, Dayton's not supposed to do that. Federal flag code gives governors wide discretion to fly flags half-staff, but solely to honor people of their own state. Not Arizona, not Congress. Again, the responsibility of the president, technically. But technically, when faced to choose between rules and what's right, leaders lead from the front. And this, technically, is why they are elected.
Okay, so governors and presidents have the ability to order flags to be flown at half-staff. It's their responsibility solely, except for one mayor, the mayor of Washington, D.C., can order it in D.C., and he's the only mayor according to the rules. Also, this isn't the first time that the president's been faced with a controversy regarding flags. If you recall, back in 2016, he ordered flags at U.S. Trump properties, right, before politics.
His own properties
to be flown at half-staff. This was in criticizing President Obama at the time because Obama delayed ordering flags at half-staff when 5 service members were killed in that Chattanooga, Tennessee killing. So it was a political slant is why he did it.
I think it's just, you know, for America, it's just it looks from us, because I learned a lot in that story, Chris, that it just is a bummer, you know, when we lose a member of Congress, certainly one that's been there for 36 years, I think. Let's all agree.
This was a self-inflicted wound by the president, and there's no way around that. That's just the truth.